Hi, I'm Ken Kiedrowski, and you've probably read somebody the story of the little engine that could, or maybe somebody's read it to you. Well, sit there, I'm going to tell you the story about the little farm that could. This little farm, somewhere in Harford County, well, in Street, Maryland, has a worldwide reach. Yeah, I mean, right down the road. You've probably passed it a million times maybe. Or maybe you didn't realize that a farm could affect different things that are going on all around the world. Well, this place does. We're at Green Roof Plants at Emory Knoll Farms, and you're on location. Ed Snodgrass, thank you for letting us come out here to visit you here today. And our viewers are probably wondering where we are. I mean, we're always on location. And today we're standing in the middle of your field on your farm in Street, Maryland. And I know that there are people in Harford County and in the entire area where this show is seen who say, well, gee, a farm is nice. What are you going to do? You're going to show us some cows, you're going to show us some corn growing, etc. But it's not that at all. And we're going to let our viewers know what exactly is, like that old show, What's My Line? You know, what is your line now? So this farm has been in existence, what, since
1840s.
1840. So if I understand everything that I've read and heard about, the farm's been in existence for 4 generations.
I'm the 5th.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, pardon me.
Yeah.
Okay,
but yeah,
he's number 5,
yeah.
And so it's gone through various changes.
Sure.
You know, you have your old school farm with the cow and the corn, and other changes along the way, and now you've arrived at the point where you have what's referred to as green roofs, plants for green roofs, and we're standing in front of one of your
one of our test roofs,
and where you see if everything is working properly. So I guess the question is, how does a farmer in Street, Maryland, forgive me, I live not too far from here, but in Street, Maryland, of all places, have a location that is involved with green roofs, and then beyond that, have an organization that has a worldwide effect and worldwide applications?
Well, I think the story is that this was a family farm, and I took over the farm in 1972, and hit a real bump in the mid-'80s when a lot of the family farmers went out of business. You're tied into commodity agriculture at a world price point, and so it wasn't economically viable, and I decided to kind of reinvent the farm around some different principles and different products. And after some back and forth and figuring stuff out, I decided to grow plants for green roofs. Now the problem was there was no green roof market yet, but I was patient, and after a couple years we started selling plants. And now we were the nation's first green roof nursery, and we're probably the premier supplier of green roofs, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry now. So it's quite an arc from a family farm.
Yeah, I mean it's light years away from the family farm. And so what was that moment when the thunderbolt came down and the voice came out of the sky and said, "You will grow these plants and have green roofs"? How did that happen?
Well, it's a new technology in America. It's connected with civil engineering and stormwater management primarily. But unlike a lot of new technologies, it's a mature technology in Europe. So in 1998, when I started, that technology was 40 years old in Europe. So I just thought it's going to come here because it's not like computers or something that's kind of invented everywhere at basically the same time. So I had an advantage to look to another country and look at their public policy and their market drivers and just kind of intuit that this is going to come here, and I can get ready for that. And an opportunity to be first in the market is very powerful.
There's so much we could talk about here. I mean, with the books that you've written, with all the other information in the field about green roofs, we could probably be talking here for the next 3 hours. But no, we're not going to be here talking for 3 hours, so just stay right where you are. Could you give us a little basic, a very, very simple basic primer and we'll show examples of green roofs. What do you have to do to have a green roof on top of a skyscraper?
Well, they're mostly on large commercial flat buildings. So first you have to have enough structure to absorb the extra weight. And then it's a very thin system of protection for the roofing, drainage to get the water off efficiently, media to grow the plants in, and the plants. And so it's actually an engineered system. Every component is engineered. It's not just gardening. And if you think about it abstractly, all the cities in the US were at one point premier ecosystems. And then we pretty much covered them with glass, concrete, asphalt, all kinds of things. And they became some of the worst ecosystems. So the green roofs are really a way to work within the constraints of the city, to put some plants back in. Plants are very powerful biological tools for making human lives better.
I know from what I've read, there's so many advantages for areas to have green roofs. People are probably familiar with watching local weather forecasts. The weather forecaster will say what the temperature is in the area, and they'll say, well, and it's warmer in Baltimore. And it's warmer in Baltimore because of all the concrete and everything else and the lack of vegetation.
Right. So when you put high-rise buildings in a city, you increase the radiant surface by a factor of 40. So it's just like you're just making more heat. And conversely, in the country where you have all this vegetation, it's transpiring water, which creates cooling. So you have this so that translates in the mid-Atlantic to about 7 degrees nighttime temperature difference, which is the equivalent of an entire power station, that amount of electricity. So it's big news to get those nighttime temperatures down.
So if a company, if a library, if a college, whatever, wants to have a green roof, what are the immediate benefits for that building and to that organization to have a green roof?
Well, first of all, for the building owner, you're going to have a reduction in energy costs. The good long-term benefit is when you cover the roof with soil and plants, the roof stops degrading in sunlight. And so you are pretty much done re-roofing. Your roofing membrane will last 2 to 3 times as long, and maybe even longer. And then a lot of jurisdictions in this area can comply with their stormwater requirements through having a green roof. So those are the 3 big drivers.
Well, as we record this program, in recent history, there was another flood in Ellicott City, Maryland. And I don't know if you want to comment, but I can't help but think if some of the construction in that general area had more green roofing, perhaps it would have mitigated or prevented the flooding.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, green roofs really perform well up to about 1 inch of rain in 24 hours.
Yeah.
When you get into historic floods, there's nothing really, there's no civil engineering solution for those. But, you could certainly, it would certainly help. It would reduce the effect. Yeah.
All right, so now this little farm that could in Street, Maryland has installations, if you will, in almost every state in the United States.
Right.
And as far as the international stage, what are some of those countries where you have it done internationally?
Well, I've commented on public policy in New Zealand and Australia. I have worked in a good bit in Europe, lecturing and giving advice in North Africa, some Morocco, South Africa, and then I've helped set up and build nurseries like this one in Mexico and China.
I guess I don't want to be too repetitive, but I spoke to people about this program that we're doing right now before we started taping, and they said, I can't believe that this exists in Harford County, Maryland. And so now you have installations worldwide. I know that you've lectured and taught courses at at Melbourne, Australia.
Yep.
And you have some business relationships in China.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's somebody here who can come on over.
We can actually produce a business relationship in China in real time.
Yeah. For those who remember Johnny Carson, he would have the visitor from the East, and we have a visitor from the East here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Chen Wei, or John, it's a pleasure to have you on location. What's a nice guy from China doing in a place like this?
I mean, this is a great thing and really interesting. Brand new industry and good technology and environmental friendly. So that's what I like. So yeah, this is a really interesting to get involved for me personally.
How long have you been working with that?
Yeah, actually, we've been working together for the past 6 years, and we are. I'm kind of this kind of international partner of Ed and also Emory Knoll Farm, and for the past 3 decades, China has been experiencing a really fast economic growth.
Yes.
And this kind of growth leads to some environmental problems like we are experiencing now in the northern part of China. We got air pollution, we got heating island effect in the cities. We've got storm waters after the heavy rains. So the Chinese government they noticed that and they said that okay, we need to do something, take some measures. So for the past several years, the Chinese government is kind of implementing the policy of building sponge cities. Actually, dozens of Chinese cities have been appointed as the pilots for building sponge cities. And green roof is a very important part of sponge cities implementation. So you can see that China is a really big country and we have a lot of cities. So it's a really big market, and the market hungry for good products, hungry for good technology and great expertise. And that is what Ed and Emory Knoll Farm can exactly provide for us. They've been doing this for decades, and they got a good team, very professional.
Mm-hmm.
They got very high quality products, really good technology, and great expertise. So that's really exciting for me, to bring all these things to China. And Ed is, for the past 6 years, we've been traveling around China and help local governments to build up, sponge cities. We do some consultancy for the governments for the public policies regarding to green infrastructure, regarding to stormwater management, and we work together with good partners locally in China, like what we had. I talked with the Beijing Barracoda landscaping company, Miss Mao, a really good entrepreneur, and we are going to establish several nurseries for propagation the green roof plants, and we supply these materials for the projects, and we do the consulting, and we do the expertise for them. So a lot of things are happening in China, and I think this kind of cooperation and partnership between me and those partners in China with Emory Knoll Farm and Ed is great, and we can make a great difference in China, and help trying to build a really harmonious society, with better quality air, cleaner water, and more environmental friendly surroundings. So that's really exciting for me.
For those of you just joining us, I'm Ken Kiedrowski. This is On Location. This is Ed Snodgrass. We're at the Emory Knoll Farms in Street, Maryland, the home of the green roof. And that's what you should have in front. You know, the McDonald's has the golden arches. You should have the green roof as you drive in your property. And Chen Wei, we're calling him John, from China. So I'm learning about green roofs, and I'm also learning that there are no real Chinese restaurants in this entire area. So, but that's for another story. That'll be another show some other time. So you've been in business there with our friend 6 years. You're establishing nurseries there using a lot of local vegetation. I imagine you have a lot of plants that, if we saw it here, we wouldn't know what they were.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination, of local plants and also some plants from here. Because China is so big, it's just the same as the United States.
Yeah.
And we share the similar climate.
How many time zones do you have going across China?
I think
We have 4.
3 or 4 is the same in China.
Yeah, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of, we have, Ed's great expertise in this field, and he can help us to select the certain group of plants that will doing well in certain regions.
Now, when you go over there, you're not taking the plants with you. Do you take seeds with you?
No.
It's all local.
You have to work with local suppliers
Yeah.
or go through proper import. I mean, worldwide, I think what they've done very well in every country is limit the amount of imported plants to not cause any ecological harm.
Yeah. Customs wouldn't like that.
But I mean, the 19th and 20th century were big. I mean, this plant is a Chinese plant.
Yeah.
So there's no need to bring it. It's there.
It's there.
Yeah. And we have imported seeds through proper channels into nurseries in China. We've been setting up if things aren't locally available. So I mean, it's like doing business anywhere. There are international companies that already import plants. If we find an appropriate plant for that area, we'll work on getting that. We've worked with botanic gardens. We worked with the Beijing Botanic Garden, the Botanic Garden in Xiamen, and other botanic gardens and plant experts around China. Certainly, I don't know enough. I can't learn the Chinese flora at a level that would that I could mirror their expertise. So really, it's about assembling a team that is that's really a good team that can work together, and everybody brings their piece, and that's where Chen Wei is very helpful.
This technology is old school in Europe. It's coming of age, I guess, in the United States. And is it like brand new? Is it like magic in China, or is it? Do people go, "Wow, I never thought of that"? Is there this recency effect that it's so new and exciting there with green roofs?
I think green roof, this kind of concept is not new, because we got mosses on the roof because in China the traditional buildings, they are made from wood, and wood can grow some certain mosses and grasses. But the modern green roof is a brand new things. I mean, it's getting involved a lot of new technology. You need to care about the drainage, the substrate, the plant selection, and a lot of things to consider. Especially in big cities, you need to consider the wind, the heat, all these factors. So when you see a modern style green roof in China, so that's just really, wow, this is really a big thing. I've never seen this before. So yeah,
well, during the course of the rest of this program, we're going to be seeing different views of your test roofs, where the plants are selected to be shipped out to the people who actually build the green roofs. We're going to be talking to your head horticulturist in a little bit. So first we'll start with our friend from the east, John, Chen Wei. Thank you for being here. And Ed, I'm in awe of your place, really. It's just so amazing, and I'm so glad I'm only a half hour away from you. Now when I drive by Route 543, I'll know exactly what's going on here, and I'll have a smile on my face. So thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Dominique Baines, here we are at Green Roof Plants at Emory Knoll Farms. I'm glad I can
say that and get it all out. And you're the horticulturist.
Yes, I
Okay,
am.
now that, now we've already learned on the show a little bit about the functionality of green roofs and how it helps the environment and how it can save roofs, how it helps save heating and cooling, allows pollinators to have fun on top of high buildings and all that stuff. But we're standing in front of this. See, being a city boy, I would call this like a greenhouse, only it's not a greenhouse because, you know, it just has the fencing or the webbing around it.
It's still a greenhouse. It has green things in it.
Oh, okay. Well, it still is a greenhouse. Well, good. I'm glad my city, growing up, my city experience hasn't spoiled me for this. So we're standing in front of all these flats of wonderful plants. And how do you select? I mean, how does that happen that you decide, well, this one, oh, I like the, it certainly isn't because that one is a nice shade of green. I like that one. I mean, they have to have a special function in order to say that we're gonna send these on top of a roof and we're gonna start saving the ecology by sending this particular species of plant up there.
So with a green roof, you've got your waterproof membrane, followed by a drainage layer, some sort of weed barrier maybe, some other engineered things, and then on top of that, you've got your media, which is soil to most people, and then your plants. So this is not a standard garden system. This
No.
is something very different from what you're used to doing on the ground. So you want plants that are going to be able to survive in a very gravelly, well-drained media. 4 inches of media, maybe less, maybe a little more, but that's not a lot for roots to grow in. They've got to be able to survive massive inundations of rain and moisture when it rains and it's heavy. Equally, they've got to be able to survive periods of drought, because in this region, the Mid-Atlantic region in particular, most green roofs are not irrigated. That's not true in other parts of the world, but certainly here, they're going to have to be able to tolerate drought. So you need plants that can survive all of those conditions. So what we've looked at are a lot of what they grow in Germany, which is, you know, they've been doing green roofs for decades before us, so we pulled some of those things, and then other things from similar ecosystems. So what you end up with are a base mix of plants that are your functional ground cover. If we look at a flat of plants here, you can see that you've got, this is called a flat, you've got 72 plugs in here. That's an individual plug.
Oh, there's 72 guys in there.
There are. And people plant anywhere from 2 to 6 to 8 plugs per square foot.
What's this little guy?
That is Phedemus tachysamensis golden carpet.
I was going to say, exactly right. Yeah.
Right, I mean, it's pretty obvious.
I wanted to test you.
Yeah, but no, it's in the sedum group. Most of these are sedums, and you use the sedums because they are generalists. They can shed their roots if they need to. If there's too much moisture, then reroot. They can tolerate periods of drought.
They can shed their roots.
Some of them really can. Not so much these guys, but certainly the smaller guys can shed their roots and come back. If bits get broken off, they can root again. So these guys are super tough. They can tolerate a lot of different things. And what we've got here is what we call a mixed flat. And a mixed flat is where we've selected a broad range of sedum that will survive on a green roof. And each roof is slightly different. You don't know until the roof is built what the wind is going to be like across it, what the sunlight's going to be, all of that kind of stuff. If you put up enough species in one go, you're going to find plants that adapt to that or are adapted to that specific roof. So you'll end up with, say, 5 plants that form your basic ground cover.
So even in an area where you know the general weather, the general climate, let's say, well, you said the Mid-Atlantic region, let's be specific. You know, we're getting into southern Pennsylvania, northern Maryland. You kind of know what to expect there. But one roof could be very different than the other.
Sure, it could have, just put this down for
Sure.
a second. Sure, I mean, every roof can be different. You can have tall buildings next to it that can create shade.
Oh, okay.
You can have an odd wind shear that comes through that will scour the media off or just blow at the plants constantly. You can have air conditioning outputs that are constantly blowing in different temperature heating outlets. So roofs are kind of, they're where a lot of stuff from a building gets dumped. And it creates, you know, and you're also several stories higher, and every time you go higher, it gets colder.
A different weather zone, so to speak.
Each roof is a little bit different. So if you put up a bunch of plants, you're going to have a few things that survive. And we like to use the sedum base as your main cover that does the main functionality that you want from a green roof. And then you can add in additional things for additional green roof benefits. And I think we'll look at some of those plants a little bit later.
So if an owner has a building, a tall building, medium-sized building, and wants to have a green roof that's going to last a while, there has to be quite a little bit of thought into what's going on that roof to determine which of these guys you're going to plant up there.
Absolutely. And what we look at is we want the roof to be successful not just in the first year or two, but 5, 10, 20 years down the line, because with the green roof extending the life of the roof membrane, this could be up there for 30 years very easily. So when you first put plants on the roof, you have some of the smaller leafed plants that are lateral rooters. They root out sideways and they grow pretty fast and cover between things. But those don't always survive quite as long as these broad-leafed, what we call the broad-leafed plants, the leafy green sedums. These will grow in clumps and will eventually, 5 years down the line, be the workhorses of the roofs, be the main colonnaders with the main colonies with some of the others in between. So we make sure that you have what would happen in a natural ecosystem, where you have the rooterals that go in and then you have the plants that follow that, like when you get grasses followed by shrubs followed by trees. We do that on a smaller scale with green roof plants.
Especially based on the history of green roofs in Europe. How long can a green roof last?
In this country, I believe there are successful roofs that have lasted at least 20 years. In Europe, I think you're looking at decades.
Heck yeah.
They do take some maintenance through that time. I mean, plants change, plants shift. You may have to add some additional plants in places. If you've put up a good mix of things, you can start to see what's doing well. And without us even visiting a roof, if someone calls me and says, hey, I've got this roof and sedum album is doing fantastically, but everything else has died out, I can say, okay, you've probably got a little bit of shade. You might be getting this level of moisture or that level of moisture. Why don't we add in these things that work well with that and up the diversity again? Because some of this is about biodiversity for the sake of biodiversity, but some of it's about biodiversity for the sake of avoiding things like the Irish potato famine, where you just have one species and if something goes wrong, the whole lot gets wiped out. You've got a much stronger roof if you've got a lot more species up there. It's going to be able to perform a lot more functions.
And when you reach an age of a green roof that's 20 years old or 30 years old, then you might have to tear it all up and start over?
Probably not. The only reason you're really going to have to do that is if you need to replace the waterproofing membrane. So if the roof has reached its level where you would essentially be replacing the roof again, you can always replant. You might need to add some additional things to the media, like a little bit of fertilizer throughout the years. It just depends on how the roof grows in. But typically it should form its own ecosystem. Even the leaves that drop off some of these in the winter will add a little bit of fertility, and the soil chemistry kind of changes. But the medias have been very well engineered too to be long living. They're made of rocks that don't break down too well, so you're not getting like soil erosion and things breaking down. They really should last a long, long time.
One last thing. Most of the green roofs that I've seen pictures of or experienced are on industrial type buildings or libraries or office buildings, what have you. Is it working its way down to homes on the street where you live?
Sure, we will certainly get there. I think the cost is the issue at the smaller level because of the amount of engineering that has to go into checking weight loading, snow loads and things like that. You know, when you're doing that on a big building or a new construction, some of that's easy to do. On a smaller building, people don't necessarily want the expense of calling an engineer out. Now on a garden shed and things, people might take a risk and say, well, I'm not so worried about my shed falling down in the, you know, and we've certainly built things here that have lasted a good long time, just by figuring out that, we've got enough loading for that.
Well, great, Dominique. Thank you for all that wonderful information. And I think what we're going to do now is take a look around and see some of the wonderful things that are growing over here.
Okay, so this is an actual green roof. It's been here 18 months to 2 years. You can see the typical gravelly engineered media that we're growing in, and I think this is about 4 inches deep. I wanted to look at some of the plants here that we're growing, and we talked about the plants that fill in later on and become the main workhorses of the roofs. And here you've got several of the workhorse plants. These are all different types of sedums with different textures. You've got Sedum kamchaticum, the Phedemus tachysamensis, Sedum cicotense, and some of the others. They're all from the same group, and these are the ones that are going to sustain this roof long term. Initially, we had Sedum sexangulaire right here and some of the Sedum album that did some of the initial covering, and you can see they're being pushed out by the larger plants. And in amongst this Sedum base that we have here, this Sedum meadow, we have some accent plants to add longer flowering seasons, attract different types of pollinators, that kind of thing. So here we have Petrahagia, which is a Dianthus relative. Up front there, I'm not sure if it's in shot, but there's a Silene, which does pretty well. And further back, there's some other accent plants too, but they're all mixed into this sedum meadow effect. Okay, so this is a test bed that we put in earlier this year. It's a mocked up green roof. It has all the drainage layers and things underneath, and it ranges from 6 to 4 inches of media. And what we're testing here are different accent plants. A lot of them are Eastern natives, or at the very least North American natives. And as you can see, there's different flowering, different heights, different textures, because although sedums are incredibly broad in their colors and textures, they are mostly one genus, so we're trying to broaden that out, and with plant plugs such as we grow, you can easily plug in additional plants. So we'd like to test this over the next 2 to 5 years to really see which of these plants last and thrive, how they seed, and how they mature.